Hello and welcome on the Barricades. This is a podcast produced by Eastern European journalists and academics. I am your host, Maria Chernat, and with me, as usual, the co-host of the show, the Bulgarian-born Polish journalist, Bojan Stanislavski. Thank you for being here with us.
Hi.
And again, we have somebody very, very interesting and informed, Mark Sleboda, international security analyst, commentator to various political media outlets, a former U.S. naval officer that is currently residing in Russia. He is a former lecturer at Moscow State University, and he also taught at London School of Economics. Do you think the Russians finally learned their lesson that they have to invest more in soft power?
Sure. I think hopefully they have. I mean, unfortunately, there will be people that probably come out of this and saying, look how effective hard power was. The weapon of last resort. Russians' ideas are not grand universalisms, right? To a large extent, of course, there is the Banderite ideology of West Ukraine, but that is dovetailed right into this whole, freedom, democracy, as absurd as it is to combine liberalism with Banderism. That has been the Maidan project since 2013, right? To fit them together. That was actually the same project that was intended in Russia. At some point, there was a realization that all of these liberal parties in Russia, have no real support in the country. And they certainly don't have any muscles on the streets. They're not going to, stage a Maidan and overthrow the Russian government. But hey, how about those nationalists, those ethnic Russian nationalists? They hate Putin too. They hate the multi-ethnic, multi-confessional federation. So if we combine them together with the liberals, then maybe...
We get Navalny.
Navalny, exactly. Project Navalny, right? That is
exactly my idea.
Very intentional. It did not work in Russia because the ethnic nationalists in Russia are not strong enough. They're not in numbers. Yeah, sure, there's knee-jerk racism and, the standard, othering in Russia that you find everywhere, but it's not as strong as it was.
And not so politicized, maybe.
Yes. But in Ukraine, it worked, I think, better than even their expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And now... Odessa, do you think that I have some friends that suggest that maybe Odessa is very important for the Russians and they would like to take it, and
yes,
and they suggest they also want to take it because a lot of crime goes on there, a lot of business, underground business, and
I don't think they want it for the crime, but
but maybe they want it for that too, also because it's
that's more cynical than me, Maria. That's more cynical than me. That's pretty hard. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think that anyone on the Russian side conceives of a future partition of Ukraine. And when I say future, right, I'm not talking the conflict is going to be over next year, right? Russia is prepared for a 5 to 10 year war at the minimum, right? They think this is going to go on until, and there may be ceasefires, there may be, temporary breaks in the combat, there may be episodes of diplomacy, but those things are very fragile, all right? And they're often used simply to bide time. And there may be peace for a year or two, right? But it will, until Russia is satisfied with the final borders. And I think eventually it will, hopefully in the shorter term, because I have some family in Odessa as well, who, have not been enjoying life since 2014 and are living very, very quietly. But I think that is the majority in Odessa. I think there is a Russian-speaking, Russian-leaning majority still in Odessa, and we saw the hope extinguished there with the Odessa massacre, the burning in the trade union building. But I think it still is embers there that the area can be and must be liberated. And from a geopolitical and military perspective, it's not just that is a part that should be with us, but that must be with us. Mm-hmm. I think it will be a priority for Russia to ensure that the Black Sea, at least the whole northern coast, falls within their purview, right? That the future rump Ukraine is a landlocked one. Mm-hmm. So there's both the Odessa should be. I mean, it was founded by Catherine the Great, right?
Yeah. I wonder what the Romanians are going to say when they start seeing the kind of the territorial corridor, like through Odessa to Transnistria.
Wait, it's not done yet, because the U.S. also realizes that this is why the 101st Airborne is right across the border in Romania there. Mm. They want to preserve Odessa, presuming the logical course of the war that eventually things will turn so strongly that Kiev looks in danger and everything. They will want to preserve it, and that is why the 101st Airborne is there. They are a mobile light. They can be put into Odessa probably in less than 24 hours as a human tripwire force. And where they're there to stabilize peacekeeping troops, to stabilize the situation, right? I see that as the single most dangerous point of this conflict, right? If Poland and the U.S. eventually send troops into West Ukraine, right, as some type of safe zone or peacekeeping mission, whatever they call it, Russia will yell and scream and threaten and start making comments about nukes that mean nothing, right? That's all hot air and bluster. But at the end of the day, they'll be like, yeah, but they took off our hands and we don't have to worry about do we go into West Ukraine or not later. But Odessa is a different matter, an entirely different matter. And if the U.S. puts U.S. or U.S. and Romanian troops or whatever in Odessa, that is the biggest potential World War III moment in my mind.
Very interesting. I would have thought so. Yes.
Russia will not accept the U.S. naval base in Odessa. There's no possible way they can accept that. Besides which, the whole, again, Odessa founded by Catherine the Great, the majority of the people there being Russian speaking, Russian leaning, there's the whole strategic aspect of that situation as well. And that may be 2 or 3 years down the line very easily, because Russia suffered a big setback in that direction when they chose to withdraw from Kherson City. Right now, they have to make a contested Dnieper crossing, which is tough. No matter what condition the Kiev regime military is at that point, it would probably be easier to go across further north, right? Even down from an incursion from Belarus through Kiev, and then take Odessa from the north.
Okay, yeah. Tell me, what do you think about potential of Belarusian army's potential involvement in the whole thing? Because I keep hearing Belarusian officials, including the president of Belarus, saying that no, like we're not going there. Like we're providing support, we're providing this and that, and we of course, we are with our brothers Russians, and of course, but no, we're not going to get involved. And they, all those who are claiming that we're going to get involved, provocators and so on and so forth. So is this the real manifestation of a genuine sentiment, or a genuine manifestation of a real sentiment, I should say, or is it just like if the president of the Russian Federation requests this intervention, that it will happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of leverage and usefulness, and I don't think that Lukashenko has any intention of sending Belarusian troops in. I don't think it will happen. I think that, first of all, that would be seen as a major escalation by NATO as far as the Russian. From the very beginning, they have, I think, naively been trying to signal limited intentions and limited escalation in NATO. If you go back to how they prevented the DNR and LNR from expanding back in 2014 and 2015, you can.
Putin had to apologize for it afterwards and say that we should have finished it off.
We should have finished, right? They should have at the time, right? I agree. And I said the same at the time. But they wanted to signal limited intentions. Even back then, other than Crimea, they intended to put Ukraine back together under terms of the Minsk agreement that, like the political arrangement in Bosnia-Herzegovina, would have prevented Ukraine from joining NATO then, right? That would have been the model. That's what Russia was looking for. And I think they were naive about the Western intentions. Putin has always been a bit of a Zapadophile, a West, particularly his
having a soft spot for the West
of Germany in particular, right, from his time there, right, and I think he trusted Merkel, which was moronic. I thought it was from the beginning, but now in retrospect, even Merkel has admitted that the whole purpose of the Minsk agreements was to build up a powerful military, a NATO military, a proxy in Ukraine. So I think that hopefully that has been beaten out of the Russian government. But I think that Lukashenko still has enough room for maneuver that he's not going to get involved. That NATO would see that as a potential for Polish troops then moving into West Ukraine. There were all kinds of conditions there. And let's be honest, military experience matters, right? One of the reasons why the U.S. military is as strong as they are is not only, the technology and the amount of money that has been, the trillions of dollars that are thrown at it to keep it that way, but because the military isn't always being used, right? There's always some low-level conflict at a minimum somewhere, sometimes 2 or 3 countries at a time, that the U.S. military is engaged with, that they're getting people blooded on, that they're getting officers trained on, that they are correcting mistakes, right? That they're finding what works and what doesn't. That kind of combat experience is incredibly important. And China has, already on paper, a large and powerful and growing military, with huge investment. When's the last time China fought a war? That's the Sino-Vietnam, right? Decades ago. So that combat experience really matters. And Russia has that experience now. From starting, if you want to start with Chechnya, which still figures into the area, and then in Syria, and in Georgia, and now Russia, if Russia isn't defeated out of this, whatever the U.S. Geopolitical thinkers, the blob, may have been thinking, the Russian military comes out of this, whatever they lose, hardware terms, casualties, and the casualties are much lower than the Western media is making them out to be, and BBC even proves that. But the Russian military comes out of this a much stronger and more capable beast than they were when this conflict started. But I think Belarus will largely stay out of it. I think Russian forces will use Belarus as a platform to launch, not just standoff strikes, but almost certainly at some point, maybe not in the next few months, but at some point further interventions in Ukraine from the north, right, which is in Ukrainian terms the soft underbelly. But I don't see Belarusian troops getting involved unless NATO gets. But
Russian troops sort of moving towards the Ukrainian heartland from Belarus, that's possible.
That's possible.
That's possible. Okay, and you just said that Russia, one way or another, unless they are defeated in some kind of humiliating manner, which is rather, not really possible at the moment. I mean, it doesn't seem like it is possible.
It's unlikely.
It's unlikely. Okay, yeah, thanks. So they will emerge stronger, like militarily and in terms of self-confidence and in terms of like the unity of the nation, all the rest of it.
My wife and I were talking about this just the other day. What are the political changes that will come out of a Russian, right? Of course, we talk about the opposite too, but considering, eventually it seems most likely, what are the political changes that will occur in Russia in the long term with a victory? The country will be more united, more patriotic than ever. Look, shall we say the 200,000 liberals in the country, they left. They're gone, right? They're not coming back. I also, by the way, question how many Ukrainians really want to return home now that they're in Europe.
Maybe, but I still want to, but I want to ask this because vis-a-vis the West, the strength of Russia or the increasing strength of Russia and the kind of, Russia reasserting its position on the world.
And now closer to China and Iran than ever before.
Yeah, exactly. Which is historic, absolutely.
Russia and Iran are now actively military cooperating, right? In the last few weeks, we have seen Israel conduct strikes in Iran that at least Netanyahu says they were against weapons that are being, against factories, against weapon depots that are being supplied to Russia in Ukraine, right? They claimed that was help for Ukraine. Now, there's a question of how real that is, but they're saying it, right? Multiple high-level Israeli officials have said that. That is huge because that means that the conflict, at least rhetorically, is no longer restricted to just Ukraine and to a lesser extent Russia, that the conflict has spread to the Middle East with Israel attacking Iran and saying at least that it was over what's going on in Ukraine. That is huge, right? If anyone is, there are still possibilities that this, and very real possibilities that at some point that this could blow up and drag more and more countries into it. The World War III scenario that Soros and Nouriel Roubini and numerous others have talked about. It is, I still think that it's hopefully unlikely, but the percentage is growing. It's not shrinking. And this could be, one of the first steps. We could already be in the early stages of World War III, and now Israel is attacking Iran and at least saying that it's because of the conflict in Ukraine, with Iran on the Russian side and Israel, even if muted support in at least in military hardware terms for the regime in Kiev. I think a lot of people have not been talking about how significant that is.
Okay. I completely agree, because that were exactly my thoughts when I saw that strike that was against the factory of the drones that Iran is giving to Russia. And I said, wow, this is really dangerous, because the Israelis are very fearful at this point that Russia might give finally Iran the technology to build a nuclear weapon or more weapons, and even more weapons from Russia coming.
They're afraid of conventional weapons.
Yes.
They are afraid that Russia has already given the S-300 air defense system to the Syrian government, but they've never let them turn it on to use against Israel. And they have an S-400 system there to protect their own forces. That covers most of Israel in air defense terms, right? They can shoot down any Israeli fighter planes, and do not underestimate how good Russian air defense is. It is the best in the world, right? And that is a part of their integrated network. Israel is terrified by that. That's why they're not providing the Iron Dome or the Hawk system or anything else to Ukraine. And they say that openly, right? But Russia could also provide the S-400 to Iran. They're already providing the part of the drone deal is to provide the Su-35 to Iran, right? Russia gets the designs I think it's more the designs than the actual physical production, but the designs for the cheap but effective and sanction-proof Shahed 136/Garan 2, but also the Arash and several Iranian also cheap but effective ballistic missile models that Russia can use to take out, stationary targets that aren't moving anywhere, like infrastructure, electrical infrastructure in Ukraine. And what did they giving Iran? The Su-35. And Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States are very unhappy about that state of affairs.
Yes.
That is a huge degree of military cooperation that has never occurred before between Russia and Iran before.
Yeah, but for the end, can I just bring you back for a while to what you said about Russia emerging stronger from this conflict, whatever way it goes?
Yes,
I mean, however,
also have a question about Russia.
Okay, yeah. So my last question, and then like whatever the final partition border is going to be, Russia in one way or another is going to emerge stronger in all those terms that you listed out. And then how does it look vis-a-vis the West? Because you said during our conversation previously that, well, it's all regardless of how things are on the ground, militarily speaking, it's all great for the military-industrial complex in the U.S. They're all floating in coins now or in gold and whatever. They're very happy opening champagne bottles because it's going to be, orders and orders and orders from Europe and from everywhere. And then, you get this agitation in the Western media that NATO is stronger than ever, everything is fantastic, Sweden and Norway are now going to join NATO. Norway has even participated, according to Seymour Hersh's material, in blowing up Nord Stream 2. So, they're already committed, everything's going fantastic, and, all the governments in Europe across the political spectrum, like the leftist government in Spain, the right-wing government in Poland, they're all giving weapons, it's all great, even this grandstanding during the State of the Union address, which where Biden was saying that the allies are spending more, they're standing up like for all those things, and I wonder, like, is there a way for the West? I mean, I realize that a lot of it is just trying to a lot of it is just propaganda, okay, in simple terms, but I wonder, is there a way for the West to also emerge stronger from this in some ways?
Sure.
Okay.
And so, in some ways, absolutely, right? And always, this argument is made again by the blob at points in their arguments about what is happening in Ukraine. It's all really about Taiwan and China.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They keep drawing these parallels that China, if we lose Ukraine, then China will try to take Taiwan, right? Even though technically even the U.S. acknowledges that Taiwan is part of China, right? And the one China policy, government in Beijing, and although we all know that that's a fiction, that whose days are numbered at this point, but the U.S. they have this is just a prequel for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you heard? It made the Western mainstream media, and they didn't even seem to care about it. There was a U.S. Air Force general who just sent a memo out to his troops, and obviously this was made public, and it was intended to be made public.
Well, that in 2025 we're going to have a war with China, right?
Yes, that we're gonna be at war with China, and that the key to that is, he said, unrepentant lethality. And to prepare yourself mentally and militarily, you should be shooting at a target of a Chinese person every day and aim for the head. I'm like, my God, these people are insane sociopaths.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Really are.
I'm a realist, a cynic, and at times a hawk. But that's a sociopath, right? I mean, you think you're in some kind of zombie apocalypse video game or something like that? Yeah. I mean, seriously, that's the way they think. This is just a prelude. And they get all of Europe now united behind them, more economically and militarily dependent on the U.S. than ever, so that they'll be able to pivot from this, whatever way it ends up, towards China in the very short-term future.
My fear is now that what happens to Russia if it wins? Because maybe there is a potential of risk there. Maybe
Sure.
Putin will get encouraged, and due to the propaganda and due to the opportunistic people willing to lionize him and to produce disgusting propaganda saying how great he is, he will lose it and become the lunatic that everybody is afraid of.
I don't think I honestly don't think you have to worry about that. And there's always, even with victory, whatever that is termed, let's say victory is a good prospect of all of East Ukraine in one form or another becoming part of the Russian sphere. That East Ukraine will be completely destroyed, right? You see what's happening in Mariupol and Bakhmut, right? In order to save the village, Russia is destroying it. This was always a big part of the problem of having this war be fought in East Ukraine in 2023 instead of in West Ukraine in 2014. Russia has to pay to rebuild all of East Ukraine. That is and presumably at some point to bring it up to the Russian standard of living. That is a huge expense. That is why the Russian finance ministry was so terrified about the prospect of having to pay for even the Donbass in 2014 and 2015. Russia is going to, if again they come out of this victorious, and if it's a substantial territorial gain, even if out of defensive intentions in East Ukraine, they are going to have taken more onto their plate than they can easily absorb. And Russia is going to be very, I think after this, happy with themselves, but also very glutted and having to absorb and bring up Ukraine for decades into the future. And that's, on top of it, there will always be a degree of destabilization. And even if 80% support, 10 or 20% will be violently against, there will be instability, there will be insurrection. I don't honestly think, yes, I think that there will be a resurgence of shall we say, I don't want to say, it's not ethnic nationalism because that wouldn't even make any sense, but Russian great power politics as a result of that. I think there will be, but I think it will by necessity be tempered by the economic realities of this. I think Russia will be economically better at the end of all of this from being severed economically from the West, and the West no longer able to weaponize the global financial sector, the two-way street of energy supplies going back, way forth, of interdependence and so forth. I think it's better than for Russia. I think Russia should concentrate on China and India and Iran, and all of their economic and social and political focus should be to the east. But of course, there's going to be a cost in growth potential from being disconnected from the West. And that growth potential, of course, is going to go both ways. But how is Europe going to pay to reconstruct Western Ukraine?
Yeah, which is it's already making those plans, which is ridiculous, of course. Yeah, but then what about the psychological effect that it could have on the West, on the Western elites, Western establishments? If Russia comes out, as you said, comes out victorious from it, to the extent that the West cannot bear with this, that it's too much for them. Do you think it's going to lead to some kind of, because you said it yourself, some of those people are simply obsessed, psychopathic, maybe, whatever. So it might lead to some kind of mental breakdown, on a mass scale.
Right. There's either two ways that could go. It could, I think it's a less likely scenario, but it could lead to some honest reflection, right, in American and
that was very optimistic. That was the most optimistic thing I heard from you.
I'm starting with the most optimistic, right? Where they think, maybe we're overstretched. Maybe we are imperially overstretched. Maybe we shouldn't be kicking things off with China right after this, so forth. That's the optimistic reading. Of course, the less optimistic reading is out of spitefulness and anger and a need now out of insecurity to prove their military might, kick things off even faster and bigger with China, right? That is the other way.
They might lead maybe, I don't know, Poland or Romania
Iran,
or some other country to do something stupid.
Yeah, I don't. Unfortunately, that's the more likely scenario, human nature being what human nature is and the U.S. being what the U.S. is. They don't take defeat very well.
And they're in it for good. I mean, they seem to be conveying the message that either we lead the world or the world doesn't make sense without it.
Or the world burns.
Problematic,
Mark,
to say the least. There is a question that's been on my mind since I first met you. And I have to ask this question. Sorry, Brian, for interrupting. Look, I know that the military personnel in general are so faithful to their country. So I imagine there must have been something very, very disappointing for you to go from the United States to Russia and not even to go there, but to support what's going on. So if you can share, of course, if you want, if it's too personal, that I don't mind you refusing to answering the question, but what was the something so disappointing for you that you took this decision?
Yeah. I'm not some kind of Snowden defector or some kind of spy or double agent or anything like that. That would be very nice and romantic. But the truth of the matter is that I actually immigrated to Russia in a very long process, similar to getting a green card in the United States. That was despite having, a Russian Crimean wife, which did make it easier than it would have been. I grew disenchanted with the U.S. military and U.S. foreign policy back when I was in the military, and when I was participating in military actions in Iraq and Serbia, that was when my big shall we say, disenchantment again with the U.S. policy of promoting U.S.-led Western global hegemony and military primacy around the world. When I became fully aware of what the U.S. was doing in those two locations. Afterwards, I pursued my university degree in international relations and security policy, and I became even more aware of what the U.S. is doing all around the world and everywhere, from Palestine to Iran and South America, everywhere, right? It is, primarily for reasons of my specialty in international relations, what the U.S. is doing around the world in foreign and military affairs in the pursuit of hegemony. It's not anything, personal, in particular, other than that. I do come from a Slavic mutt background that includes Russians and Slovaks, and probably, I think, one Pole, Boyan, but generally my family tries to pretend that didn't happen. No offense.
I feel you.
Yeah. I mean, everywhere I come from in rural bum F coal country Pennsylvania, everyone in my hometown is Slavic of one variety or another, right? Poles, Russians, Ukrainians, Slovaks, Czechs, everyone, right?
I'm mostly Bulgarian, so I just live here, right? Okay, so so thanks a lot for sharing this.
Also, my wife, I met my wife and married her. She's Crimean, from she's Russian from Crimea. So, that certainly helped help me make the decision to leave the U.S. behind and move permanently immigrate to Russia.
Yeah, well, but thanks for sharing that, because I think it puts certain things. I mean, it puts your analysis in picture as to like you're not on any private war with the U.S. It's not your personal revenge or anything like that.
No,
you just
no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
I got out with an honorable discharge, and actually I turned down a big, 6-figure bonus offer of reenlistment, as a nuclear reactor operator, and the money was certainly not worth it to me at that point.
Okay.
Maybe you could tell me, is there any help for Bulgaria showing political sanity and remembering what part of the world they should be part of?
Well, I
don't think so.
I'd like to be optimistic, okay, about Bulgaria in certain aspects, because Bulgaria is a bit of a different society from the other kind of, Visegrad, for example, society. It's different. It belongs to this Orthodox bow. I mean, it's closer to Russia, to Ukraine, to Belarus, Serbia. It has, the majority of the population. I'm talking, throughout all age groups, like conscious people, of course, I'm talking 15 years old and older, they support Russia either on the basis of their emotions or either on the basis of their kind of political understanding and perception. The problem only is that the political establishment has nothing to do with those sentiments. I mean, they are, handpicked by the American embassy, put there, and they are given a concrete and specific mission. That's been the case for the last 2 years, and then the mission is accomplished, the government falls, and then there's a new round of elections and all the rest of it. So this is, and we even have a joke that the central electoral committee or whatever, like this body that oversees elections, they are already done with the calculation of the votes. They're only waiting for the voting to actually occur, because things are so unstable that it almost doesn't make sense to even have elections. But there is a bit of hope, a small ray of hope, in a sense that there's growing discontent within the Bulgarian public with everything that's happening, and that's on top of 30 years of economic, civilizational, if you like, downgrade. And there are people emerging who are kind of people leaders, okay, nationalistic, kind of patriotic, but also left-leaning in certain aspects, who are trying to make their to become part of the political mainstream political life, and to represent those emotions, those political emotions in the society. And they stand a chance because, unlike the other parties, which are not parties because precisely they don't represent anything and anyone, they do represent something, and they might be, they might get elected. The problem is, okay, you get elected, and then what?
Then
what?
It's like,
what? Then Hungary, right? Now, I'm not a huge fan in terms of domestic politics of Viktor Orban.
Yeah, me neither,
but
right?
In terms of foreign policy, I think he's
the only adult in the room.
He's the only adult in the room. He's the only statesman in all of Europe.
I know.
He has reasserted Hungarian sovereignty in the face of both Brussels and the U.S. So whatever else you may think of him, and I think a lot, against him and on other terms, you have to admire him, and I think it's probably very hard for Bulgarian politicians to look to Hungary as an example of what could be.
And we had a guest from Hungary, and she explained that somehow Orban is doing the game of Germany, that whatever Germany cannot say in public, Orban is doing, it for them, because they are hugely supported economically by Germany. So maybe behind the success and the
let me just make
lies something else.
Right.
Because
let me just make one more remark with regards to Orban, because I think this way is, of course, this could be an example. This could be a reference point, at the very least. But the thing is only that Viktor Orban is a seasoned politician with a lot of experience, and he's a real politician. He understands politics as interests, responsibilities, and all the rest of it. And there are some people who try to mimic him, like our Kaczynski, the petty wannabe dictator of the internal political process here. And it's just like he is exactly too petty, too small, too incapacitated. He's just a poor copy of Orban. And I'm just afraid that, again, I don't agree with many of the ideological concepts that Orban has subscribed to, but we don't have cadres of that scale in other European countries, and I think this is a very, very serious problem. But perhaps we could discuss it, in another program.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you once again, Mark, for being here with us and for answering all our questions, for your insights and comments. And I hope to have you back on in a couple of weeks. All the very best to everyone. Stay healthy and keep fighting. We'll see you in the next segment.
Fighting
Bye.
for peace.